Rain has a way of making a courtroom sound older. That morning, even the wooden walls seemed tired. I carried a file so thick it bent in my hands, and before noon, I knew somebody's life might split open. If you've ever been judged before you spoke, stay with me a while. Some stories don't ask for noise, they ask for one honest witness. I'm Judge Judy, and I've spent 32 years watching people walk in wearing armor. Some hide inside anger, some hide inside perfume, money, or perfect manners, and some are so worn down they forget to hide it all. That day was gray from the moment I parked my car. The sky sat low over the building like wet wool. Shoes squeaked on old tile. The clerk's voice sounded smaller than usual. Even the coffee in my chambers tasted like bad news. The file waiting on my bench was heavier than most assault reports. Not violence, money, pages and pages of fines, photos, notices, storage fees, and late penalties. The city wanted $184,672. When my bailiff read the name, the room changed. You could feel it. A few heads lifted at once. Caroline Mercer, the daughter of hotel billionaire Victor Mercer. Most people in that room thought they already knew her story. Rich girl, spoiled manners, a famous last name, and enough family money to dry up any problem with one clean signature. Then my clerk leaned near and whispered something else. He said the young woman outside had snapped at the cameras. He said she looked straight toward the doors and said, "I'll own this court." That kind of sentence can poison a room before a chair even scrapes. By the time the handle turned, nobody was ready to be fair. She stepped in wearing a camel coat that had once been expensive. You could tell by the cut and the lining, but the cuffs were rubbed pale and soft from too much use. One button hung by a single thread. The hem was speckled with dried mud. Her heels were designer shoes from another life. The left heel had been glued and glued again. I noticed it because she leaned away from that side without thinking. She carried no purse, only a folder hugged flat to her ribs. Like if she let go, she might blow apart. Her hair was pinned up fast, not styled. Dark roots showed under old salon color. A pearl earring sat in one ear. The other was bare. Her hands were neat but bitten raw around the nails. Then she looked up at me. Not proud, not soft either. Her eyes had that bright, dangerous shine people get when sleep leaves them too long, the kind of shine that comes before a person says the wrong thing. I asked her to state her name for the record. She did. Clear voice. Then the clerk read the total again, slow and cold. Caroline gave one dry laugh and said, "At that price, Judge Judy, I'll own this court." You could almost hear the room harden. A woman in the second row sucked in her breath. One officer folded his arms tighter. The prosecutor lifted his chin like the case had just been won for him. Caroline seemed to hear herself too late. The prosecutor was Martin Hale from the City Compliance Office. He was neat, pressed, and careful with every page, not cruel, just the kind of man who trusts a spreadsheet more than a pulse. He believed numbers because numbers never cried. He stood and gave me the city's story. 37 parking violations, 9 expired registration penalties, impound fees, storage charges, missed hearing fees, ignored notices. He showed photos of a black SUV in loading zones, bus lanes, and hospital fire lanes. He showed timestamp after timestamp. He showed letters mailed to the Mercer estate. He showed a report calling Caroline uncooperative during the tow. When he finished, the math looked brutal and complete. I let the silence sit before I spoke to her. "Miss Mercer," I said, "your name opens doors for other people. Today it may close them, so don't give me pride, give me truth." She swallowed once and nodded. Then she opened the folder with both hands. I noticed they were shaking, not dramatic shaking. The fine tremor of a body running too long on fear. Her first words came out smaller than her clothes. She said the SUV had been her father's. After he died, everything froze. The money, the houses, the cars, all of it got tied up while adults in suits fought over his estate. That part was simple enough to understand. Rich people can still leave a mess behind. A frozen account is still a locked door. She said she had no active credit cards and no trust payments. She had a famous last name and almost nothing else. She told me she was not living at the Mercer estate. The papers kept going there anyway. She had been pushed out by her father's second wife 3 days after the funeral. No screaming scene, just changed locks and a guard at the gate. She had one legal bag, 2 coats, and the SUV. That was her first revelation. The room shifted, but only a little. People will forgive pain faster than they forgive privilege. She still had to climb farther than most. Then I asked where she had been staying. That was when her mouth tightened. She said she rented rooms when she could. She slept in the SUV when she couldn't. She kept blankets in the trunk and her clothes in garment bags. Mr. Hale looked down at his notes as if they might rescue him. I asked if anyone from the city had verified her mailing address. He said notices were properly sent to the registered residence. Properly. That word has buried more people than cruelty ever did. Let me ask you something. If a woman walks in wearing cashmere and hunger, which one do you believe first? That room had to answer that question with me. Caroline took a breath that seemed to hurt. Then she gave me the second part. Her father had left behind one child the tabloids ignored, an 8-year-old boy named Eli, her half-brother. Eli's mother had entered treatment the week Victor Mercer died. No grandparents were nearby. No aunt stepped in. No trusted nanny stayed once the checks stopped. So Caroline took the boy and kept moving. She said the SUV was the only car big enough for his foldable chair. I looked up at that. Mr. Hale did too. A chair means a different kind of story. Not every illness shows on a face. Then I asked one more question. I've learned not to waste them. I said, "Why the hospital fire lane?" Her lips parted, but no sound came first. She pressed her thumb hard into the edge of her folder. When she answered, the whole room felt smaller. Eli had leukemia, blood cancer. He was getting treatment at the Children's Center 6 blocks from that loading zone. Some mornings he could walk. Some mornings he could not hold his own head up. Those violations, she said, were not shopping trips. They were chemo mornings. They were fever nights. They were pharmacy runs after vomiting would not stop. They were the worst hours of a child's life. She told me the day of the tow, Eli was asleep in the back seat. There was a bowl under his chin, 2 blankets, a paper wristband from oncology, and a stuffed fox with one eye missing. When the truck lifted the front wheels, he woke up screaming. No one moved for a long moment after that. A pen rolled off someone's table and sounded too loud. Caroline did not cry. She only stared at a spot near my bench like it was the safest place left. That was the moment the room finally heard her. I turned back to Mr. Hale and folded my hands. "Counselor," I said, "how many of those violations happened within a block of the cancer center?" He checked his pages, then checked them again. "Most," he said. "Most is a lazy word," I told him. So he counted. 29 within a block, 6 more on the route between the center and a 24-hour pharmacy. The last ones near a laundromat and a church shelter. I asked whether any notice had ever been handed to Caroline directly. No. Whether any city worker had spoken to her before penalties doubled. No. Whether anyone had reviewed the tow report for signs of medical need. He hesitated before answering that one. Then came the evidence that changed everything. Not from magic, from patience. Caroline slid a worn envelope across the table. Inside were hospital parking receipts, pharmacy slips, and treatment schedules. All dated, all timed. I had my clerk line them up beside the city photos. The match was exact enough to sting. A photo of the SUV at 7:12 in the fire lane, an infusion check-in for Eli at 7:18, a pharmacy receipt at 9:43, same morning. Then there was the image that made Mr. Hale go quiet. Hospital security had sent over a still frame from the tow day. It showed Caroline half inside the back seat, one hand under a small boy's neck, the other clutching a vomit bag and a jacket. The child's face was pale as paper. His mouth hung open in that limp, sick sleep children get after heavy medicine. A white wristband flashed against his tiny arm. On the seat beside him sat the stuffed fox. The missing eye was plain as daylight. Stay with me here, because this is where justice can still go wrong. A single image can save a life, but only if someone is willing to really look at it. I asked for the tow body camera footage, too. The room watched it on the side monitor. Rain streaked across the lens. You could hear Caroline saying, "Please wait, he's sick." Not screaming, pleading. The officer in the video was not vicious. He was hurried. He kept saying he had a job to do. Caroline reached into the car for a medication cooler. It slipped from her hand and hit the pavement. Small bottles rolled under the truck. Then came the part the city had not mentioned. A second officer bent down and picked up one bottle. He read the label into his microphone. It was anti-nausea medicine prescribed to Eli Mercer. The camera caught the child crying in the back seat. Martin Hale removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. That tiny movement told me more than his words. He had walked in with a clean stack of violations. Now he was staring at the cost of not asking one extra question. Systems fail one shrug at a time. I told the room something I've learned the hard way. Rules matter. Without rules, the weak get crushed first. But rules without judgment turn into blind wheels. And blind wheels roll right over children. Mr. Hale tried one last time to stand on the rules alone. He said emergency lanes must stay clear. He was right. He said notices cannot bend for every sad story. That is also partly true. I answered him as plainly as I could. This is not every sad story. This is one trackable chain of facts. A sick child, a frozen estate, a wrong address, a direct medical pattern, and a city that kept charging after it knew better. He started to speak again, but I raised my hand. When the facts change, I said, the decent thing is to change with them. The room went still. He sat down without another word. Sometimes silence is the only honest reply left. I adjusted my glasses and looked at Caroline. Then I looked at the city. My gavel rested under my palm. The sound of rain had eased outside. Inside, nobody breathed freely. Here is my ruling. I let each word stand alone. The city's claim for ignored notice is dismissed. Gavel. The notices were sent to a residence she did not control. The storage charges after the tow are dismissed. Gavel. The city had clear signs of medical need on the day of seizure. The impound should have been reviewed within hours. Gavel. The expired registration penalties are reduced to the base amount only. Gavel. Not because tags do not matter. They do. But because access to title was blocked during an active estate dispute. The parking violations tied to treatment days are dismissed. Gavel. The evidence shows repeated medical urgency, not careless luxury. The remaining non-medical violations are reduced and converted to a payment plan of $30 a month. Gavel. Total due $690. Caroline did not gasp. That is what television expects. Real relief is stranger than that. Her shoulders dropped first, very slowly. Then her right hand left the folder and covered her mouth. She bent forward once, like a wave had hit her knees. Her repaired heel slipped sideways on the floor. She caught herself on the table edge. No tears fell at first. Her face just lost 10 pounds of strain in 3 seconds. Then she looked up at me with those same bright eyes. Only now the shine was different, not sharp, wet. One tear hung at the bottom of one eye and stayed there, as if even crying had to ask permission. I could have stopped there. The order was clear. The court had spoken. But people are not made of rulings alone. So I leaned forward and spoke to her as a human being. Miss Mercer, I said, do not wear this morning like shame. You were carrying too much, not too little. Then I asked the clerk for the resource sheet we keep for emergency family aid, housing contacts, probate clinics, hospital transport help, food support. I stepped down from the bench, which I almost never do. I handed the papers to her myself. Her fingers were cold when they brushed mine. I told her one more thing. Pride is heavy. Let people carry a corner of this with you. From the back row, a voice spoke before anyone could move. It was a man in a maintenance jacket from the hospital. He had come for the security footage and stayed for the ruling. He raised one hand like he hated attention. His badge said Tomas Rivera. He said he knew Caroline from the children's floor, not the rich parties, not magazines, the vending machines at 2 a.m, the hallway chairs, the bad coffee, the long nights. He said she used to leave half her soup with the other parents. He said once she sat with his wife during a blood draw because he was parking. He said Eli called every nurse by name. Then he looked at Caroline and added, that boy learned gentle from you. There are sentences a room never forgets. If this story has touched something quiet in you, hold it there for a moment. Sometimes a life turns because one stranger finally says what they have seen. That matters more than people admit. 2 weeks later, the story escaped the courthouse walls. A local reporter ran a piece with the security still beside my ruling. Then a radio host read parts of the transcript on air. By Friday, my chambers had 3 bins full of mail. Most of it was for Caroline and Eli. I had my staff count it because the number shocked even me. 614 letters, 83 gift cards tucked into plain envelopes, 27 offers for short-term housing. 9 lawyers volunteered to untangle the estate fight for free. 4 mechanics offered repairs for the SUV. The Children's Hospital received donations in Eli's name, too. Not millions. Real money from real people. $12, $38. One envelope held only $7 and a note that said, "I'm a bus driver. This is what I can spare." I kept thinking about that note. A church near the center gave them a furnished basement apartment. A widow mailed a box of boys' pajamas and comic books. A retired teacher offered to tutor Eli during treatment weeks. Someone paid the insurance on the SUV for 6 months. Someone else replaced the broken heel on Caroline's shoe. The city changed one policy after the story spread. Medical review flags were added before extended storage fees could pile up. Not perfect, but better. That is how reform often starts, not with speeches, with embarrassment and one corrected form. 6 months later, on a bright Monday, my clerk said they were back. I looked up and almost missed her. Caroline still wore a camel coat, but this one fit her shoulders instead of hanging from them. The cuffs were clean and whole. Her hair was cut to her jaw now, not styled for a photographer, styled for a life. Both earrings matched. Her hands were still plain, but the skin around the nails had healed. No fresh bite marks. The biggest change was how she stood. The first time, she looked like a person bracing for impact. This time, she stood on both feet. Even the old habit of leaning off the repaired heel was gone. Her eyes met mine without flinching and without daring me to look away. Beside her stood Eli in a navy sweater and sneakers that lit up when he shifted. He was thinner than boys his age, but not ghost pale anymore. He held the same stuffed fox. Someone had sewn a bright blue button where the missing eye used to be. That little repair nearly got me. Caroline told me the legal clinic had secured temporary access to family support funds for Eli's care. She had taken a job at the hospital foundation, not a glamorous one. She organized donor files and parent transport schedules. She said it felt good to move papers that actually helped people. Then Eli reached into his backpack and handed my clerk an envelope. Inside was a thank you card drawn in green marker. It showed a woman with a gavel, very large glasses, and impossible hair. Next to her stood a fox and a boy in a chair with rocket wheels. At the bottom, he wrote, "You saw us." That landed harder than praise ever does. Because children don't flatter well. They tell the truth in straight lines. Caroline smiled when she saw my face. It was her first easy smile in my courtroom. Before they left, she told me one small thing that proved more than any speech. She had kept the payment plan, even for the reduced balance, every month, $30 on time. "I wanted Eli to see debts handled clean," she said. "That is how new lives are built, quietly." So let me ask you something before I tell you how I remember that day. What kind of world do we build if people must collapse in public before we believe them? And what kind of people are we if we keep watching and learn nothing? After court ended that evening, I sat alone in chambers. The building had that emptied-out hum it gets after dark. A janitor's cart rattled somewhere far down the hall. The rain was gone by then. Only the smell of wet stone remained. I looked at Eli's drawing again before I locked it away. The law is paper, yes. It is schedules, signatures, deadlines, and words that must be exact. But justice is something warmer and far more fragile. Justice is what happens when a person inside the system decides to stay human. People think this job hardens you if you do it long enough. Sometimes it does. You see lies. You see games. You see people use grief like a costume and anger like a weapon. But if you are not careful, you start treating the truthful ones the same way. That is the danger. Not one cruel person, not one bad rule. The real danger is getting so used to paperwork that you stop noticing the shaking hand holding it. And once that happens, the bench is just furniture, nothing more. I have learned that mercy is not the enemy of order. Mercy is what keeps order from becoming cold theater. A courtroom should not be a place where the loudest story wins. It should be the place where the truest one survives. That day, truth arrived in a worn coat and a child's broken toy. When I finally turned off the lamp, the room went soft around me, wood, paper, silence, and one old judge still thinking. Some mornings the law weighs like stone. Some mornings it opens like a door. That day it opened, and that was enough.